But as a kid, I thought like, oh no, there are these rules and they just can't break them. They just like the cops will never shoot an innocent person. It just doesn't happen. And now I'm getting older and I'm realizing how this system works, and how sometimes it doesn't work. And I almost feel like a pawn sometimes when I think about some of the things I taught in class when I was a teacher, or when I was a veteran. I mean, I am a veteran. When I was a veteran? When I was,
I renounce my veteranship.
When I was in the Army, you know, I look back on that and I wonder, like, I feel like I was duped sometimes.
That's heavy.
Yeah, it's bad. Yeah.
I am a science communicator. Actually, let me rephrase that. I'm an accidental science communicator who wanted to be a comedian and storyteller, but somehow my focus shifted to nerdy science stuff. That became my wheelhouse. That's my comfort zone. Early on in the channel, when I was going for comedy, I would get into social commentary a bit because that goes hand in hand with comedy sometimes. And every once in a while, I just had something to say, damn it. But I got away from that. And while my politics definitely creep out in videos from time to time, because sometimes science and public policy collide, like in the case of a global pandemic, cough, cough. But for the most part, I keep my political views close to my chest because it's not really what my channel is about. And let's face it, it's a minefield and my comments are crazy enough as it is. So I stick to what I'm comfortable with. But today I'm talking to somebody who does openly share his political views and does do mostly social commentary on his YouTube channel, Knowing Better. He prefers to keep his real name private for reasons we talk about in the conversation, so I'll refer to him here as KB. KB is an Army veteran who served in the Iraq War, and what I think is interesting about him is that he's somebody who's gone through some major worldview shifts in his life, guided by his experiences in war and through years of covering social topics and working with other creators in that space. So he kind of understands both sides of these debates better than most because at various points in his life, he's held beliefs on both sides of the argument. So in today's conversation, you'll hear a lot of shop talk between two YouTubers about what it's like doing what we do, plus the differences in covering the different genres of content that we do. But we also get into some pretty political stuff. I'll come out and say it right now. Some of you might not like some of the stuff in this episode. We talk about some very difficult topics, and I'm not going to lie, some of this makes me really uncomfortable to talk about publicly. This is not in my comfort zone at all. But these are the kinds of difficult conversations that we probably need to be having. So maybe me stepping outside my comfort zone can spark some similar conversations for you guys. Or leave you screaming at your dashboard and sending me emails in all caps. I guess we'll see. Either way, there's some really interesting stuff in here, and I really enjoyed talking to him. In fact, we enjoyed it so much, we went a lot longer than I meant to. This is a bit of a longer episode, so maybe I should stop talking and just jump right into my conversation with Knowing Better. So, we've met before. Do you remember that?
Yeah, at VidCon.
At VidCon, yeah. Yeah, we were at that standard party.
Yeah.
And somehow I wound up chatting with you, and then Natalie Wynn steps up and is talking to us. And I was like, oh my God, there's Natalie Wynn. It's Natalie Wynn. I mean, no offense to you. It's like, well, cool. It's
no. That's pretty much my reaction. Yeah.
It's like, be cool.
Yep.
Don't say something dumb. I just said something dumb. Never fails.
I feel that way about a lot of well, okay, I shouldn't say a lot, but some of the people in standard anyway. I feel like they're just on a different plane than the rest of us. So
it feels like it sometimes. That's what's fun about VidCon though. You just kind of like wind up randomly talking to somebody and you're like, I've been watching this guy for years. This is crazy, you know? And it's funny because like as your channel grows, people start to look at you that way.
Yes.
Have you experienced that?
Oh yeah. I've definitely been on both sides of the parasocial relationship. Now, I guess there's like three phases of it, right? When you're a fan, just watching YouTubers and they're just all sort of YouTubers. And then when you're just starting out on YouTube and you're like first meeting other YouTubers at VidCon, whoever it is that you think is big, Vsauce, CGP Grey, whatever, but you're just a tiny person, so you know they don't care. And then once you get up to a certain level, you know, silver play button or whatever, it kind of feels like you've made it. and you have a very different perspective on it. But through each phase of that, you experience the parasocial aspect a little differently. And now that I'm established, I have some weird fans for sure, but also very small creators reach out to me in the same way that I did, to the people who I look up to. And that's definitely a strange experience to be asked, like, hey, how should I do this? And I'm like, I'm asking him how to do this. What do you don't come to me.
It's a head trip.
Yeah. So it's interesting to kind of reflect on those different phases of the parasocial relationship.
Yeah. I did I think I've been to VidCon 5 times now. I think I first started in like 2015, and of course the last two they didn't have, or it wasn't in person or anything. But I totally fangirled out on Destin from Smarter Every Day. He was literally just standing at the top of an escalator having a conversation with somebody minding his own business, and I walked by, I was like, oh my god, I'm your big watch your channel, and then I walked away like, did I really just do that? Oh my
yeah.
Seriously.
I can definitely see why, having been through the different phases of it, I can see why the big people, the huge like million sub, well, you're a million sub person now, the 10 million sub like people, why they don't really interact with fans, because it's just imagining what I have times 100 or whatever. I see why they kind of stay hidden and they only go to like the standard party or like somewhat exclusive events rather than just going out on the floor. Because some fans are creepy. I don't know if you've experienced that yourself, but
I've had some.
I definitely have some stalkerish type fans that I have to keep an eye out for. So
I had, I don't talk publicly very much about it, but I had an experience like that earlier this year. Earlier this year. And it kind of shut me down a little bit. I mean, I didn't stop posting videos, but I certainly, I don't share as much personal stuff as I used to.
Yeah.
I mean, I never put like my address up there or anything like that, but I definitely don't talk openly about things that I'm going through. Like, I've got a second channel. It's called Joe Scott TMI, but the whole idea of it was something I could literally just like press record and no editing or anything, just no script, just talk about whatever. And I would do that. And I would talk about personal things that I was going through. And, during the pandemic and everything, I was kind of sharing my experience with that and whatnot. But I've only posted like a few times this year. And that's partly because I had a pretty interesting situation develop, with somebody getting a hold of my phone number and calling me. And
yes, I've definitely had the weird fans find landmarks in old videos. That's why I don't film outside anymore. And people ask me that all the time. Why don't you go outside? I used to, go to the park or go to some bridge or whatever it is as a backdrop. But people figured out where I lived. And this was back when I had like a few hundred subscribers, and I was this is happening already. That
you cultivated
really
weirdos
weird.
Early on.
It was quite early. So I stopped filming outside, and there's of course I don't use my real name. I'm Knowing Better, or KB, people call me that. Because here's another, I don't answer most emails or Twitter DMs or anything like that. I read them for sure. But I've learned that answering any question, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be, what was your source on this? What kind of camera do you use? Can you clarify this point? Anything like that. Anything I answer opens the door to them telling me their whole life story and asking me to fix their problems.
It's never just a question. It's always a conversation starter.
Yeah. It's never just like, oh, here's the source. Oh, thanks.
Have a nice day.
I mean, I'm probably not remembering the times where it was that way, super simple, but there's been enough of those where it's turned into a 2 week long conversation where I'm like, how am I ever going to stop? They're asking to meet up. And I'm like, oh, no. So I've just stopped doing that.
Yeah. And it's funny, like I want to be the guy that responds to all of them and is approachable. And what is it that somebody coined this phrase, and I'm going to murder it and not give credit, but it's something like you become famous on YouTube for being authentic and approachable and like everybody else.
Yeah.
Then once you get to a certain point, you can't be that way anymore. And then everybody hates you.
Yep.
Like the very people that wanted you to become famous now hate you for being famous, you know?
Yes,
and it's just like,
exactly.
Yeah.
I remember feeling that way about musicians when I was a kid, like finding a band that's still kind of indie, and then they make it and you're like,
yeah, screw them, they sold out. Exactly.
Yeah.
So the VidCon thing, it's funny that you say that about how like the really big YouTubers, they don't really go to VidCon anymore.
Yeah.
Like they go there, but they don't go there.
Yeah.
So there's an episode of Frasier that I feel like perfectly encapsulates the VidCon experience, especially going one year after another. And yes, I'm super white and watch Frasier every once in a while, but
I haven't watched that in forever. So okay,
here we go. Every once in a while, it's like a warm blanket. It's just like yeah. Anyway. But anyway, there's an episode where Frasier and Niles find out about this spa. I'll call it a spa, I guess, club, whatever. And it's really exclusive. And they just like, oh, we have to get in there. We have to, be a part of the mucky mucks and everything. So they get in there and everything is glorious. And they've never felt this level of relaxation ever before in their lives. And they're just going on about it. And then like somebody walks out of a gold door and they're like, wait, what's that? And they find out there's a level above that, and now this is garbage. This is the worst. I am insulted by the level of treatment that I'm getting. And so they like do everything and they twist arms and whatever to get into the gold level. And then they get in there and then they find out there's a diamond level.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's just like, oh no, we have to, and then they eventually wind up like, they eventually wind up just like out in an alley because they mistook the door for an exit door anyway. But VidCon's the same way. Cause like, I guess level 0 would be not going at all. And then there's like the first level that's community, and then there's creator, and then there's industry. So like the first time I ever went, I went as a creator. And then the next time I was actually working for a guy. So I went in the industry level. And then when you're at the industry level, like this is the top level. And then there's like, oh no, there's all these parties that you have to be like represented in some way to get in there and stuff. Yeah. So there's still this other level. And then you go to that. And then like the ultimate level is like you just said, people like going to VidCon, but not going to VidCon. They just hang out at a house somewhere. And
yeah.
And so you're right back where you started, really, because you're not actually going into the events.
The first VidCon I went to, I went as a creator, and this was back when I had maybe 3,000 subscribers or something. I was still quite small. But that's your first VidCon is when you learn about all of the special parties that you're not invited to and all the wristbands that you don't have. Right. So it becomes a quest to get as many wristbands as you can.
And you see some guy with them all the way up the arm, like, who is that guy?
Really special person.
Yeah. But it's not always about like how big your channel is. I've seen it is sort of like an inner circle thing. There are people
for sure
connected in VidCon. And actually the last time I went, and this is very not my best side, but I'm having a conversation with a couple of people that I'd met before, and we're just kind of catching up. And then they got to go into this like VIP area that I couldn't go to, but their channels are like half the size of mine. And I'm like, hey, I'm good enough. And I just felt so insulted, and it shouldn't be about that, but
there's a lot of that.
Knocking you down a peg or two.
There's a lot of that, especially when it comes to who's in standard or we create edu or all of the other little groups. It becomes it's almost like those British lords that have all the letters after your name. Like you have to like, which groups are you part of? And when you're first starting out, you feel like I'm not part of any, so I'm not important enough, and I'm not getting invited to anything. So YouTube, like most industries, is who get your connections, get invited to stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's supposed to be this open thing. It's YouTube. Anybody can get on there and you know, and
It's definitely
it's still who
possible
you know.
it's possible to make it on your own, but it's very difficult without friends and connections, not like an insider at YouTube, but just other YouTubers who can tell you what you're doing wrong, or perhaps shout you out although I will say, now that I'm a larger channel, I've learned how somewhat insignificant shout outs are.
Yeah.
Even at my size, if I shout someone out, first of all, it has to be like a direct collaboration where they're in my video. If I just say, hey, check this person out, nobody's gonna go. I might as well have not said anything.
Yeah.
But if it's like a collaboration where they're in my video and I'm in theirs, there's like a 1 or 2% crossover. So of the 100,000 people who watch my video, 1 or 2,000 will go over. So when people ask me for shout outs, like, oh, please, it'll really jumpstart my channel. Like, I don't think it's going to be as good as you think it is. Like, you'll maybe get 1,000 out of it, and then that's it. And that's,
have you done a lot of collabs and stuff?
So I don't do them as often anymore, just because my videos are longer, and I also I procrastinate a lot, so it's hard to be like, hey, can you do this in a week, because my video is coming out. But occasionally I've been working on a video long enough to be able to actually do a collaboration, and I've done 2 or 3 of them this year. Like the Ancient Aliens video I did, had Alternate History Hub, of course. I mean, I couldn't think of a better collaboration for that one. And oh geez, I'm forgetting a few of them. I did a collaboration with JJ McCullough on the libertarianism video. And the Starship Troopers video I just did also had Alternate History Hub and Not Just Bikes. He was reading some quotes for me.
Oh yeah. Okay.
But yeah, collaborations like those are, well, I guess the Starship Troopers one didn't count as much because I was like, just say this and I'll do all the work. But the Ancient Aliens one was the last one where it was like, you do 10 minutes or whatever and I'll do, and then we switched over. But they're a lot harder to plan out than one might imagine. Especially, you know, when you're dealing with different time zones and we're all adults, it's hard enough just to meet up for a drink or whatever. So like working on a similar project is quite difficult. But I do it on occasion.
I have not focused on that at all. And it's one of those things that, like, you know, when you're first starting out and everybody's giving you advice, that's one of the things I always say, do collabs, you know, mess around with other creators and stuff. And like we were saying a second ago, it's good to know other people, if nothing else, just because this is such an isolating career, you know, like there's not a lot of people that do. None of my personal friends do this. And it's just like all I freaking do. And so whenever we get together, I just don't even know how to talk to people anymore. You know, I'm just like, see, we're doing this and all we're talking about is YouTube, because that's like all I do. But I think it's good to know other creators, and that's why it's good to go to things like VidCon and whatnot. But
there are diminishing returns on going to VidCon, though.
True.
The more you go, it's like, okay, it's the same stuff. There's really no reason to go to talks for me anymore.
Right.
Unless it's some super rare thing. Like I don't go to just how to do your audio.
Yeah.
No. So.
I need to learn which place to plug that thing into. Let me go sit in the seminar. No, you're right. I mean, like the first maybe couple times I went, I would go to all those like panel discussions and stuff. And
I had a full day planned out.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm going to go to this. And then after a while, it just becomes about, you know, just reconnecting with people you might have met last year. But that's why I think it's important to go if you are small. It's like you get hooked up with other people, and as they grow, you can kind of grow with them and whatnot. But I know it's funny. In a way, I kind of miss VidCon, and in a way, I kind of don't.
I don't miss the content.
You know?
Yeah. I miss the coming together every few months. It seems like we did.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't miss like, oh, I need to learn how to optimize my analytics or anything. Like that's none of that stuff is useful to me anymore.
Yeah.
Especially because at this point, I've kind of learned that a lot of these people also don't know, and they're just sort of
Well, and it works different for everybody. You know, what one person
yeah,
does is not the same for you. And I used to always say that, like, people would go, oh, Marquez Brownlee does this thing, so I'm going to do that. Or Linus Tech Tips, you know, these people with like 10 million subscribers. And I'm like, they live in a different planet than you do.
yeah,
The
yeah,
rules are different for them than they are for you. Like,
yeah.
you can't get away with the same things that
Like
they do.
one of the main rules I remember hearing is consistency. You need to have a consistent upload schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Like whether it's every 2 weeks or every month, you need to have consistent. Look at CGP Grey or ContraPoints or any of those. They don't have an upload schedule and they do fine. Like once you cross a
Right.
certain barrier, the rules no longer apply really,
Yeah.
and you can just do whatever you want.
Yeah.
I'm
Like if
not there yet. I
Vsauce,
don't think.
if Vsauce puts out a video right now, it's an event.
Yes,
It's like
yeah,
a
like
big
everyone
deal.
stops what they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. But that would not be the case for me.
Yeah, yeah. Me neither.
Now, having
Yeah, a
said that,
lot.
I've been very adamant about the consistency thing. Like I put out every Monday
Mm,
videos. Should clarify, put out videos. But I really feel like that helped my channel grow in a lot
yeah,
of ways.
I
If
think it
nothing
helps
else,
in
it
the
just
beginning.
becomes a part of people's routine, and they know to look for it. And then you get that sort of view velocity when you first put it up because everybody's kind of looking for it.
Waiting, yeah,
So that is one of my biggest pieces of advice. Plus, you just like learn how to create efficiencies and get more, you know, strategic or whatever. But
yeah.
anyway.
Another point I wanted to kind of talk about with the collaborations
Yeah.
thing is I don't do them as often anymore because of something you brought up earlier, and that's the being canceled sort of thing.
Oh, yeah.
You kind of have to watch who you're working with because there is a kind of guilt by association
Mm-hmm.
on the internet, um, whether you like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I still deal with that. You know, why did you have this person do a voice once 3 years ago? And it's because 3 years ago I wasn't thinking about, well, how will this person's actions affect my channel in the future, including actions I don't know about, that kind of
Or
stuff.
actions that happened after you did it.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
then
actually, as I started doing this podcast, that was one of my big worries. That's still something I worry about a little bit. Is like I want to get interesting people on here, but sometimes interesting people
are
have done
controversial.
interesting things, you know. And
I
yeah,
mean,
I'm afraid that that's going to blow back on me at some point.
you know, it could. It could.
Yeah.
In the beginning, my biggest problem was I would collaborate with people who would then quit and just
Oh.
disappear. So I have all these people who've read quotes for me in the past whose their channels don't exist anymore, or I've shouted them out and they don't exist anymore. So those are kind of a bummer to me, but it has informed my kind of rules going forward.
Yeah.
If I want to collab with someone, it has to be with someone I think is going to be around in a year or two and is not going to go on a racist rant or come out with a video about the Jews or whatever.
Yeah.
And like just you know, you have to think about, especially in a history and politics realm.
Sure.
I have to be mindful of that. Though, you know, I am not without controversy myself when it comes to the Columbus video anyway. That has always sort of been a dark cloud that's followed me around.
Am I going to get in trouble just for talking to you right now?
I don't think
Am I going to
so.
get that stink?
No, I don't think so.
I did a Columbus video too a while back, but yours
well,
says defending Columbus, doesn't it?
yes, I know.
Okay,
Yes,
well, that's what gets
I
you
know.
in trouble. Yeah.
Yep. Yes, I know. There was a response video to it. I want to say 2 years ago at this point, that caused a lot of controversy, and I was sort of pushed out of the bread tube space on Reddit over that. And I came out with a sort of follow-up video to it that I thought would help, that just didn't. So I kind of backed off from that. But I will say that experience changed the way I make videos for the better. Because I've had response videos done on me before. Usually it's some right-wing libertarian who it's very easy to kind of just dismiss. Like an angry gamer saying that he can actually see in 8K or whatever. It's easy to just sort of like ignore those people. But in this case, it was someone from like my own side, and they were taking my jokes out of context and stuff. So I realized I can't do that anymore. I'm to a level where I can't kind of jokingly suggest I can't play devil's advocate as myself, because then people will take that and say, look what he said this, even though the next sentence is the opposing viewpoint that I actually believe, or whatever it is. So right, I started creating characters. that's where that came from.
I was going to ask about that.
The characters were created for those one-off situations where I need to say what an oil executive would think about this without saying this is what an oil executive like. I just wanted to have fun with it. So I just created this whole cast of characters: a postal worker, a sheriff, the ancient aliens guy, a libertarian. Like I probably have like 20 of them now, and they do come back every once in a while when I want to kind of emphasize a point or just kind of make a joke. But that came out of that realization that if I want to talk about both sides of an issue, I need to present the side I believe as me. And then there needs to be another character. And I've made it so that the lights change. Like there's all kinds of cues so that if I'm ever cut out of context, I can be like, the light is orange, I'm wearing a costume. Like, come on, this is not what I believe. And so far it's worked quite well.
It's smart.
Well,
no, thanks. It is. It's really smart, because I haven't, to the best of my knowledge, I have not had like a response video calling me out for anything that I'm aware of. But I do get, look, it's part of storytelling that you kind of shift directions. You present one side and then you present another, and then, here's a piece of information you didn't have before, and now it swings it back the other way. That's how storytelling works. And people don't wait to hear that alternate side of it before they get down in the comments and start flipping out at you. And it's like,
the worst response videos are the ones where they press play and they're watching along with you, and then they pause and they're like, this is ridiculous. I bet he's going to say this, this, and this, and look how wrong he is. And then they press play and I say exactly what they just said. And they're never like, oh yeah, like I guess I'm wrong, and he actually covers this. Okay. Or it's 10 minutes later I bring that up. They never like go back and think and say, oh, I needed to take the story in whole and not minute by minute. But this response video in particular was quite a deep dive into my video. And I did realize that my portrayal of certain events was inaccurate, or could have been better anyway. I don't think there was anything in the original video where I was like, it's just wrong and I need to delete it. Because I have taken videos down when I find out that some major fact is incorrect, or my point is no longer valid, or whatever. But I don't feel that when it comes to the Columbus video yet anyway. My views are definitely shifting and have been wildly over the last 2 years, just because of, oh, well, now that I'm doing YouTube full time for sure. And of course, everything is closed. I've just had a lot of time to research the things I want to know more about. Before this, I only ever read for school. I didn't really read for fun. Like I couldn't justify sitting down and reading a book I wanted to read when I was supposed to be reading this book for class, right? So I just never really read for fun. Until YouTube, and lately I've been reading a lot about the things I've always been curious about. So I before COVID, I did this big series of all that changed in 1972, about how a lot of stuff that we kind of just assume has always been this way didn't happen until 1972 or 71, around that time. The post office, the police, that kind of stuff. And while learning that, a lot of the preconceptions I had, or at least what I was taught about politics and the way the world works, and this is just how it is, I realized it hasn't always been this way, and you changed it, Dad. Like your generation is the one that did it. So I'm like, well, what else? What else am I wrong about? What else is newer than I thought? And you'd be surprised at how much around us is new, and we're still trying to figure it out. Of course, everyone brings up cell phones and the internet, but the police and the post office. The police didn't exist until the late 1800s. The post office, not until the late 1700s. Like, these are all fairly new things. As school as well, like that.
Compulsory education.
Yeah. Like, I just had, growing up, I always just had this vision of life, let's say even colonial life, that was basically like what we have now, minus TV, minus radio, minus the internet. Like, I just sort of subtracted the things I knew didn't exist. So in my head, like, the Pilgrims are all living in single family homes. The dad goes to work, the mom stays home and does chores. Like, that's what's going on in my head. And that's not at all what life looked like back then. Like, there were 20 people to a house and they're all sleeping in the same bed. Everyone got up and worked at the same time. It was very depressing, really. When I learn about it, it's I'm like, right now I'm learning about company towns. I'm making a video about company towns, and I thought this was going to be a somewhat simple video of, the company owns the house or the housing, they pay you in script, and isn't that terrible? Whatever.
You owe your soul to the company store.
Yeah. But as I'm learning about it, almost every town in America was a company town when we started. They were all textile mills or cotton plantations or whatever. And everyone lived in company housing. You worked a 12 to 14-hour shift. There was a town clock. Everyone went to work at the same time. There was no alcohol, no gambling, no dancing. Like, the company controlled your life, even your off time, because they owned the town and they said what was allowed inside. So I ask myself, like, what did these people do in their free time? Like, they climb trees. What are they? Because here's the thing, books also didn't exist really back then. Sure, we had the printing press, but they were expensive. And really the only books that existed were the Bible. That's it. Like, Mark Twain wasn't alive yet. Pride and Prejudice hadn't been written. Like, books just didn't exist. So everyone just read the Bible. And that's why you have these like religious movements, the Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses and all these others, that are also extremely new. So just learning this stuff about how drastically life has changed in the last few hundred years, and how we are still figuring it out. Like we still somehow think you're supposed to work 40 hours a week. Why? Because some company decided that once, and now we're like, no, we should do this, and you should work harder. And in English anyway, your entire identity is your job. Think about how you answer that question. When someone says, what do? You say, I am a teacher. I am a YouTuber. It's not, I make YouTube videos. It's, this is what I am.
This is my identity.
Work. Yeah. It's so bizarre to me that how new this is, and that we're one of the only cultures that does that. English speaking, especially, but America for sure. Where everything is about work. And if you're not being productive, you're, idle hands are the devil's, whatever, blah, blah. It's strange to me. And I'm starting to question a lot of the stuff I was taught as a kid about how America is the best place ever. Because I'm like, I think we made a lot of wrong choices, especially when I look at other countries and how they're dealing with, just how they use the post office or the police. Their cops don't have guns and somehow don't get murdered all the time. It's so it's been tough becoming an adult and realizing that a lot of the stuff I thought as a kid or even into college is incorrect or oversimplified to the point of being incorrect. And I'm
like
also
folk tales that became legends that became truth or something.
Yeah, exactly. And I start examining my own part in that, since I was a teacher, and I was also telling people this, like, if you get stopped by the police, if you haven't done anything wrong, just tell them whatever they ask. Like, just in hindsight, I'm like, that's the dumbest thing. Like, no, you get
no matter
a lawyer
what neighborhood you're in or what you look like, they'll all be fair to you.
Yeah. Like, they're not. Here's a real simple example, like freedom of speech. We have this idea in our heads that in the Constitution, it says, you're allowed freedom of speech, and therefore you can say whatever you want, do whatever you want, period. We know that there are some exceptions to that. You can't yell fire or whatever. But when we say something and we get in trouble for it, we're always like, no, it's my freedom. Like, if you want to say F Joe Biden or F Trump or whatever, like, there are cops that will stop you if you have that on the back of your car. And they're like, no, it's my freedom of speech. Freedom of speech isn't like some shield you can use, or some like magic phrase you can use where the cop is like, oh, you're right, and they leave. They will arrest you, you will be found guilty, you have to appeal, you have to lose the appeal, and then you appeal again to the Supreme Court, and that's when they're like, you're right, you can say that. Like, most people are not going to go through that entire years-long process in order to defend their right to say the F word.
Which costs a lot of money.
Yeah, like, most people don't do that. But as a kid, I thought, like, oh no, there are these rules and they just can't break them. They just, like, the cops will never shoot an innocent person. It just doesn't happen. And now I'm getting older and I'm realizing how this system works, and how sometimes it doesn't work. And I almost feel like a pawn sometimes when I think about some of the things I taught in class when I was a teacher, or when I was a veteran. I mean, I am a veteron. When I was
I renounce my veteranship.
When I was in the Army, I look back on that and I wonder, like, I feel like I was duped sometimes.
That's heavy.
Yeah, it's bad. Yeah.
You serve.
I deployed to Iraq.
You were in
Iraq, 2009, 2010. The reason I have been thinking about this is I just did a video on Starship Troopers.
Yeah, it was great, by the way. It went to places I was not expecting. I was like, wow, that's really cool. I never looked that far into Starship Troopers before.
See, it's something, it's another one of those things where I can very easily remember how I felt about it 20 years ago, because I still have the homework I wrote. So I have the paper that I wrote in college talking about Starship Troopers and talking about how I really think this is a good system that we should have and stuff like that. We actually went over this on my Twitch stream. I pulled up all my old homework and we read through a few of them.
That's brave.
Yeah, well, I mean, none of it was like terrible, right? Like I turned this stuff in for a grade. I'm not going to say anything that's going to get me like in real trouble, but there were some definite political views in there that I'm like, oh my God, like I'm so glad YouTube didn't exist back then, because I would be a Sargon fan for sure. Like there's just no way. I'm saying how we should invade Iraq because Saddam Hussein has just been annoying for the last few years and stuff like that.
Was that during the first one? The first one?
No, this was leading up to the second.
Oh, okay.
So I had grown up, all through elementary school and high school with this annual cycle of Saddam Hussein not letting inspectors in, and then we're going to go to war. No, we're not. And like we did this a few times, I remember. So I wrote a paper like, he's just going to keep doing it. Let's go. And it's just terrible. Like, so I can see like where I used to be and how I've viewed this particular piece of media over time. So like I saw the movie, I loved it as a kid. It's an alien war movie. It's gross, it's violent. The music is awesome. It's a good movie. It's a good movie. And then in college, I read the book and I'm like, oh, the politics of the book is just so much better. It just makes so much more sense. And now, like 10, 15 years after that, reading the book and watching the movie again, I'm seeing how when I read the book, took things from the movie and put it in the book that wasn't there, and like it was just in my head.
Like you got him kind of confused.
Yes, yeah. Like as I was reading the book, I'm picturing Johnny Rico as Casper Van Dien.
Yeah.
And it's not until the very end that you learn he's Filipino. And at that point, I've been reading the whole book picturing him. So who cares? That's kind of how it was.
Yeah.
So anyway, Starship Troopers was absolutely an inspiration for me to join the military, because I wanted to be like that. I wanted to be the hero, and
you want to do your part.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so doing this video recently and going over how I felt at the time, the message of the movie and the book, I was like, man, I fell for it like hook, line, and sinker. I mean, not just Starship Troopers. It was the whole culture at the time. If you remember, The Patriot, Saving Private Ryan, Band of Brothers, all these late 90s military movies that made it seem awesome. And it made me feel like I'm supposed to do my part to be a hero and all that. And it was actually serving in Iraq that kind of shook me out of that, because it wasn't at all what I expected it to be.
Is that just the realities of war kind of thing, or were there specific, I guess, political things that you were witness to?
Both. Okay. I think most veterans can attest to this, but you go to basic training expecting Full Metal Jacket. Like you're expecting this guy to be yelling at you, to be punching you, force feeding you stuff, like group punishments. That none of that happens. It really doesn't. It may happen for like 5 minutes here and there throughout your several months of basic, but it's not like constant like in that movie. So then when you go to war, you're expecting action all the time. Like you're on edge the whole time. And after like a week there, you realize like it's not like that at all. Okay, so just
is it like a lot of boredom mixed in with
so
moments of terrifying, or maybe it's not even that?
I
guess it depends on
the terrifying stuff comes after, I think. Like while you're in it, it's not so much. But here's an example you may kind of understand. So in the lead up to the deployment, we go through all of this training so that we know what to do when we're there, obviously. So we're driving down this street in Texas, and there's a Coke can on the side of the road with a wire coming out of it. And all of us see it, and we're all like, okay, stop, call, do the 3-line whatever to EOD to get them to come out and do the things that they need to do and all that. And then you continue on with the training. And so that's what's in your head when you deploy. Then you get there, and there's just trash and dead animals and burned out cars everywhere. If you were to stop for every Coke can that you see, you'd never get anywhere, right? And also, it's probably nothing. So there were a few times early on where we're driving along and we see something suspicious, and we call, and then we have to wait for 6 hours for EOD to show up. Meanwhile, our call has stopped all of the traffic behind us. So all of the other convoys now have to wait for 6 hours. And then when it turns out to be nothing, you're the least popular person.
Yeah.
so we
so you almost get punished for doing the right thing.
Yes.
In a way.
Yes. So there just became a culture of hey, we're all driving on the left side of the road up ahead. Why? Don't ask why. We're all just going to be on the left for the next few miles, okay? And you know what that means. It means there's something there, but we're just going to go because none of us want to call and wait and that. So it's nothing like what you expect. It's nothing like the movies for sure. It's hours of waiting around doing nothing, days sometimes, mixed in with mandatory suicide prevention and sexual harassment prevention talks. Like they have to mix those in all the time. It's that over and over. It's nothing like in the movies where you're sitting there in your foxhole and you're, toughing it out with your bros. No, it's you're in a tent. You're mad because your girlfriend hasn't emailed you back in 3 days. Like it's just stuff like that. Yeah. So that's what it's like. But okay. The thing that the thing that woke me up sort of was, what am I doing here? Like, what is my mission? And I was sent as a convoy security gunner. So I was on the machine gun on the top of a Humvee, and we were protecting supply convoys going north. So from the Kuwait border to Nasiriyah, Iraq, it's the next largest city above Basra. So we would run full convoys up and then empty convoys down. So immediately I was like, well, that whole blood for oil thing is BS. I know that because I'm carrying oil into Iraq and empty trucks out. So that wasn't true. So that I never believed that part of, the anti-war protests. Though I will say, well, okay, ask me about that later.
Well, just for clarification, when you say blood for oil, what exactly?
We didn't invade so that we could just steal all of their oil and bring it back to America. That's kind of what was in my head when I hear blood for oil. Now I understand what it means and I agree, but that's only because of years of reflection. But at the time I was like, this blood for oil thing is not true. Like, we're not stealing the oil or anything. But the base I was taking all of those supplies to was a Halliburton base. I was protecting Halliburton and supplying Halliburton, and the people I was protecting were being paid 3, 4, 5 times more than me and telling me, once your enlistment is up, come work for us and you'll get paid what I get paid. And I was like, this is the military industrial complex. Like, it was that real, like this mythical thing that I had always just dismissed as the liberals just complain about that. And I'm like, I'm here, I see it, I'm part of it, kind of. And I felt really used in a way. And once I got home and I started connecting with other veterans, that's been a real common feeling, uh, especially among Iraq veterans and Vietnam veterans, but not as much Afghanistan. There are, but there seems to be, like, Afghanistan seems more justified than Iraq was, since the Taliban and Al Qaeda were in fact there. Like, nobody denies that part. But just in being there and in the years since, I'm kind of like, I feel like I was duped, and not just in the military sense, though that is what has affected me the most. It's just in the America sense. Since I was since I was an American history teacher, I taught the story of Thanksgiving, which I now know to not be at all accurate. Or even when you talk about the founding of America, you're talking about the Pilgrims fleeing religious persecution and coming over to create a new country or whatever. I now know that that's also not true. Like, the Pilgrims were Protestants living in England. They weren't being persecuted. What they were fleeing was that England had just made peace with Spain, and part of the peace deal was that Catholics could live in England. And these Protestants wanted a pure country, and left, and they founded America specifically to keep out the Catholics and the Jews. And that's not a very nice story, is it? So we tell ourselves it's this, oh, they were coming over to, like, that's why there was so much anti-Catholic and anti-Irish, anti-Italian immigrant stuff, because it was specifically founded to not have them included.
Away from you people.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Joe Scott. You might remember me from the podcast you were just listening to, and I'm here to talk to you about CuriosityStream. Have you ever found yourself endlessly scrolling through titles on one of your streaming services and you just can't find anything that really gets your brain going? And maybe you thought to yourself, it sure would be neat if there was a streaming platform that only streamed high-quality, mind-blowing documentaries and educational programs from some of the best filmmakers around the world? Have you ever wanted that? Well, so you're in luck, because that, my friend, is CuriosityStream. CuriosityStream is the premier streaming service for documentaries and educational programming, with thousands of titles to choose from, and everything from history to futurism, science to art, whatever you're interested in, you can find it there. Seriously, the only problem with CuriosityStream is that it's littered with rabbit holes that you can easily get lost in, so be sure to pace yourself. And they're always adding new content, like the series What Went Wrong, that examines some of the biggest disasters and mysteries of the last 50 years, including the Challenger disaster, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, and London's Grenfell Tower fire that killed 72 people in 2017. Oh, and have you ever been watching really great documentary programming and thought to yourself, hey, it sure would be neat if there was something like that for my favorite YouTubers? If so, then you're in even more luck, because when you sign up for CuriosityStream, you get free access to Nebula, a streaming service created by some of your favorite YouTubers where you can see their videos ad-free and where they can feel free to experiment and try new things without the dreaded algorithm hanging over their heads. I'm on Nebula, actually, and it's the only place you can see my Nebula exclusive series Mysteries of the Human Body, where we delve into the weird and sometimes scary world of unexplained diseases. It's a fun time. There's also original series from Real Engineering, Wendover Productions, Legal Eagle, Minute Body, the list goes on and on. Nebula is like our own little piece of the internet, and you're welcome to join us. And the crazy thing is, you get both of these streaming services at a ridiculous discount if you sign up at my special link, which is curiositystream.com/JoeScottPod. That's curiositystream.com/JoeScottPod. And here's the crazy thing. Usually you can get 26% off for both services when you use my link, curiositystream.com/JoeScottPod. But because it's the holidays, they've got a special deal going on. You'll get not 26%, but 42% off a yearly subscription, meaning you'll get 2 streaming services for an entire year for $11.59. So one more time, that's curiositystream.com/JoeScottPod, and you can start streaming smarter. And thanks to CuriosityStream for supporting this podcast. I think, sort of on that note, like, there's been a bit of a reckoning, it feels like, in our
Yes.
country
Yeah.
over the last couple of years and whatnot. And that has exploded in negative ways in some
Yeah.
cases. I have Black friends, and I don't know if it was because of everything that was going on, but it opened up some conversations about the different realities that we live in,
Yeah.
and everything from one friend saying that he would love to have a Tesla like I have, but he knows he'll get pulled over. Like he can afford it. He can afford nicer cars, but he's afraid to, because when he's driven around in nice cars, he gets pulled over. That is nothing. I've never had to think about that in my life. I've never had to
Yeah.
think about that when I move into somebody's neighborhood, their property values might go down.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, stuff like that. I've never had to think about that.
Yeah.
And that's a reality they have to live with every day. It broke my heart hearing a buddy of mine talking about how he had to explain to his kids what to do if they got pulled over in extreme detail,
Yeah.
and it's like, I didn't have to have that discussion.
Yeah. That discussion for me was just do what they say.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
say yes, sir, and just do
be
what
nice.
they say. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's
Yeah.
not enough. But it's like, it's interesting because we are sort of, and let's give the younger generation credit, because they're interested in that sort of I don't want to say revising history, but sort of like digging in and finding the dirt there.
Yeah. Yeah.
They seem to be more open to it, or more and maybe that's one of the upsides of the internet or whatever. But
I think every generation is that way, though. I think my parents, and I'm sure your parents, thought the same thing, like, wow, you guys are really progressive or whatever, to an annoying degree in some places. But I agree with you that there has been a reckoning in a sense, and I wish more people had the ability to sort of self-reflect on that, because I have benefited from this system, and it took me a lot of work to get to the point where I could say that, because
you came from a more right background, didn't you, or more libertarian?
Yes. Yeah.
And you've swung a bit more.
Yeah. But I mean, my life wasn't easy. Like I remember being unemployed for years during the recession, and not being able to make rent and all that. So when I remember that stuff, and I hear people saying you benefit from a white supremacist system, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like,
it didn't feel like it.
Yeah. Like from my perspective, I've been struggling like crazy. But I will, in part, as part of being a veteran, I'm exposed to people, minorities all the time. Like they serve more than white people do. So it makes sense.
More of a melting pot in the military than
and I hear stories, and I tell them what's going on with me and how tough it is. And I hear, like, if that same thing were happening to them, it would be 10 times worse. Because, or women, here's something I've never had to think about with women. They can't just walk through a parking lot at night by themselves. That's something I've never even thought twice about. Like, if I'm leaving Walmart at midnight because I needed cough medicine or whatever, I will confidently go straight to my car. I won't be looking around wondering what. I don't have to worry about that. Women do. They think about that all the time. Or like you said, Black people being pulled over. It's just stuff I've never had to think about. And it's only now that I'm older that I'm able, and I've seen, how society works, that when someone tells me, well, this is my experience, I'm very capable now, I think only because I'm in my late 30s, able to be like, oh my, you're right. Like, I've seen it from the other perspective, but I've just never thought about how it looks. And I also think media has changed a lot. Like, a lot of people finally learned about the Tulsa massacre because of HBO. I'll say I first learned about sundown towns because of HBO. And for those,
is that Lovecraft Country?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
I
So,
never finished that. I watched
oh,
like the
it's
first couple episodes and then I lost it. But sorry, go ahead.
it was that was tough to watch because it was very much like they move into a neighborhood, a white neighborhood, and all their
Yeah.
neighbors hate them. Stuff like that you would never like. What? And that's just everybody was like that. Like it wasn't like one racist in town. It was the whole town is like that. But anyway, a sundown town, for those listening who don't know, is no black people are allowed to walk the streets at night, or they'll get lynched. And it's called a sundown town because they had to leave by sundown.
It wasn't just that they couldn't leave their house; they couldn't be in town, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they, like they didn't live there either.
Right.
So I saw that on Lovecraft Country and I was like, no way, there's no way that's a real thing.
Yeah.
And I looked it up, and there are hundreds of cities across the country that were that way. The somewhat liberal college town, I won't say where it was, but it was a liberal city in a red state, was a sundown town. And I was like, that blew my mind that not even 100 years ago, black people just weren't allowed in this city.
There are people alive today that were around when that was the case. Yeah.
So the reason I was somewhat excited to talk about this, I'm learning about company towns right now. And like I said, it's I thought it was going to be simple, but it's teaching me about all kinds of stuff, especially labor issues and unions. But that's a topic for another time.
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot about the transformation of slavery after slavery. Like I grew up, I'm sure you did too, thinking slavery ended 1865 with the 13th Amendment. We all also kind of understand that it wasn't great afterwards, but I don't think we really think about it. Like there's sharecroppers. We all kind of know who those are. They rented the land they lived on and they didn't own the crop that they grew. It went to the person. And that doesn't sound very fun, but
it's kind of like a fiefdom.
Yes.
I mean, I was doing some stuff about like, Middle Ages.
You're a peasant
like
and a serf.
Yeah.
But after Reconstruction ended in 1877, the South's economy had just not gotten back to where it needed to be. So they realized that the 13th Amendment says involuntary servitude is abolished except as punishment for a crime. Mm-hmm. So they started just arresting black people for all kinds of petty things, theft. I mean, I say theft, but often it's like a chicken egg or something, like something really minor that we wouldn't think of. And of course, and I'm sure some of them did do murders and assaults. I'm not trying to discount them, but a lot of it was just made up. And for a white person who maybe like your what was it, your wife's, who was it?
Oh, stepdad.
So for people like him, they hear that and they're like, oh, well, they're just criminals. They're that race of people is just more likely to be criminals. Before the Civil War, if you had asked a white person in the North to describe a black person, they would say they're hardworking, they're industrious, they're loyal, they're obedient. Now, these are not great words.
Kind of back of the hand compliments there.
They are kind of slave-oriented words, but they're still somewhat positive, I would think. Like they're positive attributes despite being an underclass. After Reconstruction ended, after the South started just arresting people and turning them into criminals, the perception in the North shifted to black people are all just criminals. They're inferior. They're never going to integrate because the South was doing this. And I can understand where that comes from when you think they are actually committing crimes. Like if you think they're actually doing these things. But one of the most popular laws that the South used to get people into this pipeline was a vagrancy law, which is, it is illegal to be unemployed, which a lot of people were at that time. not just black people, but weirdly only
Yeah.
black people were getting arrested for this.
I feel like this is going to come around to the company town thing
Yeah.
again. Because
So
if you're a company that owns a town and somebody doesn't work for you, then what the hell are you doing here?
yeah, well,
Sorry,
that's one aspect of it. Yes, the company could control who was in it. But after the Civil War, after Reconstruction ended, these company towns would hire, these company coal towns specifically, would hire prisoners in the South to work in the mines. So someone would be arrested for being unemployed, be labeled a criminal, and then have to do slave labor in a coal mine. And this went on until the 20s, when a white person was caught up in it and died. And this happened in Florida. And everybody was like, okay, no more convict leasing, was what the program was called, convict leasing. And they sort of, the South kind of shifted strategies in a way that you may not expect. They kind of shifted to debt peonage, which is you owe me money, and you're going to work for me and I'll feed you, but you also owe me for the food and the housing, and then the
it's
debt
like Victorian
just keeps going.
workhouses.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And company towns were popular for doing that, or did that very often. And again, America was like, okay, no, you can't do that. That's serfdom, and this is America. So they made that illegal. So then the South, people in the South, stopped doing that too. They stopped doing convict leasing, they stopped doing debt peonage, and then they just kept slaves. And when the cops are like, you can't like have this person working for you and not pay them. And like, why not? Because the 13th Amendment says slavery shall be abolished, period. It doesn't have any punishments or anything. It doesn't say those caught with slaves will serve 10 years or anything. So slavery wasn't illegal in America until 1935, when FDR signed that into law. When do you think the last slave in America, not like sharecropper or wage slave, none of the gray area stuff, like chattel slave, when do you think the last slave was freed in America?
I don't want to know. I was probably alive, wasn't I?
Thankfully, no. 1942.
Okay.
1942.
Okay.
World
I thought
War
you were going to
II.
say 70 something. Like, God.
World War II was already happening, and the last slave was freed. My grandma was walking around on the earth when slaves still existed in America.
It's amazing.
So not only have I now understood that slavery has just sort of changed names over the years, but I'm recognizing a pattern. So the drug war, all of a sudden, drugs are illegal in 1971. They weren't illegal before that. White people do drugs too, but man, they sure do like arresting just black people for this. So I see this happening, and I see the origin of they're just criminals. They're just more likely to be criminals. Or when I did the school stuff, they just have bad IQs, low IQs. And no one ever stops to think that maybe that neutral thing, the law, the IQ test, or whatever it is that they're using, isn't actually neutral. And that's kind of where I've landed in my journey as an adult, but also a YouTuber, is this actually neutral? And then I explore that. So schools, company towns, whatever it is that I'm looking into, I'm trying to like, is the story I was always taught, is that the real story, or am I looking at it through the same rose-colored glasses that I watched Top Gun and Starship Troopers with, where I'm just like, yeah, America is the best because whatever, and I'm
because I'm here.
because I was taught that.
Yeah. So I guess here's my corollary to that. So I live in Texas. I've lived here my whole life. And, we have our own mythology about how we were created. We had our own revolution. We were our own country for a little while there. It didn't last very long, but so I mean, yeah, where are you from?
I grew up in Hawaii.
Oh wow,
which was also its own country for a little while.
Yeah, and there's some iffy stuff there too.
Yes, yeah.
From what I've heard. Well, okay, so the story of how Texas came to be was that it was owned by Mexico, and then the ruthless dictator Santa Anna started like taking away our freedoms and imposing oppression upon us and all this stuff. So that the Texians fought back and they all sacrificed themselves at the Alamo. And then Sam Houston yelled, "Remember the Alamo at San Jacinto!" And they beat this amazing army that was like one of the greatest in the world at the time. And because the Texans are so strong and everything, and we've been badasses ever since. Like that's what you get taught in school. Something they fail to mention in school, and I've only found this out fairly recently in my life. I'm sure it's just a coincidence, but Mexico abolished slavery just before the Texas Revolution. Interesting that.
Yeah.
Kind of reframes everything that happened at the Alamo and whatnot. And I was I was thinking about this and I was like, okay, so Texas fought for slavery twice. And they're the only state in the country that won a war over slavery.
I hadn't thought about that part.
So, it's
okay. I might be mixing this up. Did they win it on their own? And then the US-Mexican War just happened spontaneously by itself a few years later? Or wasn't the Texas Revolution just the prequel?
I think it was a prequel.
Okay.
What I was reading about it was saying that like Texans like to draw comparisons between the Revolutionary War, the American Revolutionary War, and the Texas Revolution, when it was really a prelude to the Civil War.
Okay.
And the Mexican War, I think, came later. So I think Texas was 1836.
Yeah, and then 1848, I think is.
Yeah. But I think it was over like New Mexico and Colorado and that area back
California then. For sure.
But you find these things out, and it's like, it's just amazing how buried all that was.
Yeah. And isn't it frustrating when you come across someone who still believes the original story, and you're like, no, it's actually this really complex, nuanced story.
Yeah.
But you have to read 3 books to fully understand it. And
here's where I get a little conflicted. I think it's important to know the truth.
Yeah,
obviously it's better to know the truth. And I think that puts a lot more context into what's going on now, because it's kind of like what you were saying a minute ago. There's a lot of people that say, the Civil War is a long time ago. But as you pointed out, the structure around the Civil War, the things that it was about, didn't end until the 40s, really, and there's still reverberations to this day. That movie, Ava DuVernay did, The 13th, that talks about how the prison industrial complex is really just kind of a new form of slavery.
Yeah.
I think was very, very well done. Sorry, just to give a little story here. I used to work at the Dallas Morning News. That was like my job for a while. I was in the advertising department, but we were doing a campaign or some ads for a guy who had a nonprofit. He was a former prisoner. And he set up this nonprofit to help transition prisoners out of the prison system, to get them jobs and cut down on recidivism and all that. And he was talking about how, like, whatever prison he was in, maybe it was Huntsville, it didn't matter, but they trained them. Well, they worked for a windshield company, and they trained them on how to like do whatever it is they do to build the windshields or repair them or whatever. And the idea was supposed to be that you are given skills that you can apply to get a job when you leave the prison. Well, people would get out of prison and then go to that company to work for them, and they wouldn't hire them because they were felons.
Yeah.
And
that's another thing I didn't realize as a kid, really. Like I thought, if you're well, first of all, only bad people break the law.
Right.
Only bad people, and you have to mean it too. Nobody accidentally breaks the law. Like that was in my head. It's very childish, I know, but I felt this way all the way through my 20s. But only bad people break the law. And once you do your punishment and all that, you're back to normal, I thought. And no, that's not the case. Like your life is ruined.
Yeah.
you can't, I
It
mean,
follows
you
you
can't
forever.
vote, which is one of the main reasons they do that in the first place, is to make sure that certain people can't vote. But you can't get a job. Like, you have to check that box everywhere. Every job that you apply for. And what employer, if they have two applications in front of them, identical in every way, except one has the check on that, they're not going to pick you. Like,
Yeah.
applying for apartments, I haven't had to check the box, but that question is on there. Like, even applying for places to live. I don't think people realize how much this affects you forever, because we never let the punishment end. And that's not even, and that's just for felons. We're not even talking about like the worst, the worst crimes where they're on a list forever, it's forever, those things. And no one wants to defend who I'm talking about, I know, but the older I get, the more I meet people who have done crimes, in their 20s, in their teens. And it's really kind of changed my perspective on who a criminal is. It's often just someone who made a mistake. Like, they're not bad people. And I can very easily think of things I've done that are illegal, and I just didn't get caught. Especially a lot of stuff in high school, because I wasn't the right age. Just to give an example. If I was caught, my life would be over. But thankfully, I'm white and I don't have to worry about that, right? Like, that's, so growing up, I'm like, man, my whole perspective was just so off. But I also don't know how to fix that, or at least how we could get children to start off with the right perspective. Because I think this is something that can only come through wisdom and experience, I guess. Like, you have to meet enough people where you're just like, they're not bad. As a kid, you never talk to bad people. Like, you just don't but as an adult, you're just, I don't know, the stuff you worried about as a kid it just sort of fades away, and you're able to talk to people. And I'm like, I did that. You got caught for that? What? Like, and you still, it's bizarre. And
there's something about, like, whatever, your entire life is defined by the worst mistake you ever made.
Yeah.
In that one
I can't
moment
imagine that
there are some bad people that probably shouldn't be in the general population, but then there's also people who are their hands were forced their hand anyway, for economic reasons, or just they were in the wrong place, wrong time, or they just made one bad decision or something. And it's rough. Like, it's hard to advocate for felons.
No politician is going to be like, lighter sentences for prison. It's not.
You can't get elected if you say, let's be good to criminals.
Although no one.
I mean, if somebody, like, I feel like it should be, if you served your time and you've paid your price, you should be able to get back to life of some kind, because it shouldn't be about just getting you back into prison. It's just, so being in Texas, everything is very much just like tough. Gotta be tough on the prisoners and criminals. But I feel like that's kind of an American thing too. Like, it's just sort of in our consciousness that, like, you're a bad guy, good guy. You're a bad guy, and you're now, shunned forever. But they could be productive members of society if things were done a little bit differently. What that is, I don't know, and it's difficult,
Yeah, I do think it's strange that we've always framed it as they could be a productive member of society. Like, you have to be producing. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier. But you're not the only person to say that, which is why I bring it up. Like, that always seems to be the goal, is to get back into society and work.
A beneficial member of society.
Yeah.
Not necessarily because you work at a company or something, but because you're contributing to whatever. I didn't mean it like that. Making me sound bad.
Yeah, I think that's very much part of America from the beginning, that industrious, hardworking, pure sort of myth that we told ourselves that we are. Again, this touches on the company town thing. A lot of while researching this, a lot of the time I found myself saying, like, you can't just kill someone for that because they wanted a raise or because they didn't want to work a 14-hour shift. You can't just kill them. But we did all the time. Like whenever there were striking coal workers, we would call the army in and they would just mow them down.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there like, you can't do that.
Watch me.
But yeah, we did it all the time. And some say that we still do it. And I guess that's something that has really been shaking me a lot, because even when I think back to the 90s with Starship Troopers or the lead up to Iraq, people were telling me, like, this is just the military industrial complex. They want to invade for oil. They want to make money. They're doing this for evil reasons. And I was always like, no, they're not. Like, you're just making stuff up. And now that I'm starting to realize that we've done that in the past and even in our recent history, I'm like, I wish I could find those people who told me that and apologize. Like, there were professors who told me there are no WMDs in Iraq. It's a complete lie. We're just going there for XYZ reasons. And I just dismissed them. And I wish I could find who they, like, I looked at my transcripts. I was like, who did I take this class with? And the names aren't there anymore. So I'm like, dang it. I wish I could reach out and be like, I'm so sorry. You were right. I'm sure you never hear this. That's why I wanted to write this message. But like this, all
it sounds
those
to
people,
me like one of those things that keeps you up at night, but the other guy probably forgot about years ago.
Oh yeah, they probably don't even remember me. Yeah, but it bothers me because I'm like, I dismissed all these people who I now know to be right. That bothers me a lot more than it should, I guess. So I'm trying to figure out ways to undo that for more people, so that more people can kind of wake up. It feels weird to say it that way, but once you kind of start to notice systemic racism, you see it everywhere. Like, you notice it in all kinds of places. And it just takes that sort of initial spark, I guess, to get people to be like, oh, wait. And then they notice. I don't know if that's how you've experienced it, but I know a lot of people, like, once they see it, it's everywhere. And that's been
this is where I do get a little bit, I don't know, conflicted or whatever. Cause like, the least helpful thing you can do in the world is to say you're racist.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, that just immediately puts up walls and makes people defensive and stuff. And in the case of like my wife's stepdad, like I was saying, she wasn't even talking about him specifically. She was just talking about systemically, but he took that as a personal affront to him.
Yeah.
It becomes really difficult to get those ideas across without it being, pointing fingers and saying things that are going to get people all defensive. But also, you tell me what you think about this statement.
Okay.
Can it go too far?
Yeah.
Because like, if like you said, if once you see it everywhere, it's kind of like a Bader Meinhof kind of thing,
Yeah.
To somebody who probably needs to hear the message, it just comes off as constant belittling or constant negativity toward this thing that they identify as being a person of a certain class or just an American or whatever. I mean, I'll just use the word, it can get obnoxious.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
And maybe even counterproductive.
Yeah.
And I don't know where the line is. Cause I mean, it is kind of like an awakening, a taking of the pill from the Matrix. I won't say what color, but but like once you wake up to it and you start to see things in a different way, you want to talk about that regardless of what it is, whether it's negative or positive, whatever, and I think some people can sort of go a little bit too far with it. I mean, like we just had Thanksgiving, and obviously, like you just said, what really happened at Thanksgiving and with the genocide of the indigenous people and everything. Of course, it's tragic, and you should be aware of all that. But now I've had people like on my Facebook timeline that are like boycotting Thanksgiving, and I'm like, okay, does me not seeing my family and eating turkey make anything better?
Yeah, I've seen people try and kind of thread that needle, and having the turkey and coming together with your family, as long as you enjoy their company anyway, is fine. There's nothing
There's
wrong
not.
with that. What's wrong is having kids dress up and act out this fantasy that we tell ourselves
Yeah.
about what happened. And that's what bothers me, because you're right. It can get to a point where it's too much, and
It kind of feels like it feels like a party pooper, Debbie Downer. You got to
yes,
ruin everything, It's
yeah.
like,
But there is a little bit, when you say, you point at someone and say you're a racist. I think for the first time in my life, I'm pointing the finger at myself in a way, if that makes sense, where I'm like, wow, this thing I used to enjoy is racist, actually. And I think part of the reason I used to dismiss sort of the liberal lefty people is because it always would be a laundry list of everything that's racist that you're doing, like baseball teams, football teams, the military, cops. Like they give you this whole list, and you're like, oh, come on, everything's not racist, and you just sort of dismiss it. So I think the way I kind of got into this was just picking one thing and researching this and being like, there's something to this, and then another one, and seeing it, and then another one, and it's sort of snowballed from there for me. But I also know that it's obnoxious to go around saying that everything's racist, so I don't do that. I will bring it up in conversations like what we're having, but I don't like go out of my way to tell people they're being racist or anything. But I do still see it around, and I'll discover things as I go. So I just moved like a few months ago into this place, and driving around this neighborhood, I found a few suburbs that were labeled as covenant communities. I was like, what is a covenant? This is like the third covenant community I've seen. What does that mean? And I Google it. And a covenant community is only white people can live here. And it's a covenant in the contract that if anyone wants to sell their house, they have to sell it to a white person. That's now.
This is actually written down.
This is how it started when suburbs started in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Yeah. Nowadays, of course, the rule is you have to equal housing, right? But everyone still owns those homes. It's not like as soon as equal housing became law, everyone had to mix, no, the people who bought those houses in the 70s are still there, right? Yeah. So it's still a white community, or a mostly white community. There's no law enforcing that, but it sure is like, if you're not going to fit in here. So I'm like driving around my new city and seeing covenant communities everywhere. Like, these are racist, but I'm not going to go around and be like,
knock on the door, you're racist.
Yeah, like these started in the 60s and 70s as whites only communities, and they still like proudly show covenant controlled on here. And so so like I said, once you're kind of aware of these things, you see it everywhere. And yeah, I want to tell people, like, did you know that homeowners associations were actually a way to keep communities mostly? It's just stuff like that. But if I were to make a video of here's everything that's racist, people would just be like, oh, that's crazy. How could the post office be racist? That doesn't make sense. It's because they're closing offices in certain zip codes just so that they can't have access or whatever. That kind of stuff. So I guess also when people are ranting about something being racist, they aren't giving the nuanced story or what part of it is racist. They're just labeling the entire thing as racist or white supremacist or whatever, when it's only, well, it isn't anymore, or it started as, there's usually some sort of twist to it that they leave out. But it's something I've been waking up to. Like every video I do, I end up finding that there's some racist twist to it. Like
there's some element of race disparity.
Yeah. The education one was a big one for me, especially because I was a teacher and I was a participant in this system, where, again, I saw both sides of it, because growing up, I was a gifted student. And I used to think that was like something to brag about, but now I'm just like, oh, how lame to brag about being gifted in junior high. But
doesn't gifted mean something different now? Because I was in GT when I was in school.
I don't know. I've always heard it as gifted and talented.
Yeah.
So I just shorten it to gifted, but I don't know if it means something different.
Well, so my wife's a teacher.
Okay.
Both my parents are teachers. I can't get away from teachers. And now I do like an educational YouTube channel. Everybody keeps saying I should be a teacher, and I'm like, no. All I've heard my entire life are people complaining about
it's
being
terrible.
a teacher.
But
no, when I was a kid, I was in GT, and we didn't have. I also grew up in a really small town, so there are just a lot of things we didn't have. But we didn't have advanced placement. So like my wife teaches AP kids, but we did have a GT program. And I may have just misunderstood or misinterpreted what my wife was saying, but it seems like she was saying that GT is almost more like a special needs kind of thing.
No.
Or like the kids that are so like wooey everywhere that they can't like focus on what the teacher's saying or something. I don't know.
No, at least that's not been my experience. That's like special education. That's
I may have totally misinterpreted what my wife was saying, but she said something and I was like, wait, that's what GT is now? Anyway.
Yeah, I don't think so. But since I grew up in Hawaii is a white minority state. We're only like 30% white. But remembering back, my gifted class was mostly white. And I've since come to understand that the creation of gifted classes was a way to segregate an otherwise integrated school. They didn't exist before the 60s and 70s when integration became law. And then they were like, okay, well, we're going to put the white people in a separate classroom. They'll still be in the same building though. So now that I know that, I'm reflecting back on my childhood, like, I willingly participated in this. And then when I was a teacher, the goal was to be the AP or gifted teacher, like that. Everyone was working towards that. And now I never got to that spot because of course it's held by a teacher that's been there for 20 years or whatever. But even striving for that, I feel weird about now because I'm just like, now that I know that because that is still the case. It is still that more white people are in gifted and talented programs than should be. So still wanting to do that means I still want to teach mostly white kids. Like it's bizarre.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Where as a teacher, I'm like, I really want to teach the segregated class. Like, ugh.
Well, if you put it like that. I want to just kind of stop for a second and acknowledge that we've been going for like an hour and a half now.
I see that. Yeah.
I'm fine to keep going. I'm having a blast, but I didn't want to like step on your time or anything.
No, so. I'm good for at least another half hour.
Well, okay. All right. I also want to acknowledge that like, I don't talk politics and especially like race stuff very much at all on my channel, unless it just happens to factor into
you're more of a science channel.
Yeah. And I don't like people hating me. But as somebody who talks about this kind of stuff a lot, I feel like it's fair enough that we could talk about it here.
Yeah.
But I mean, I did want to ask like what it's like just to talk politics on YouTube, because I mean, the kind of stuff that I get back, I can't imagine what somebody who talks politics on YouTube must get back. And the other is like a lot of what we're talking about here, like we've really gone on a lot about the race stuff, which again is not something I talk about very often. I'm deeply uncomfortable right now, but anyway, no, but what do you say to somebody who's listening to this and doesn't get exposed to this kind of talk too often and thinks that it sounds like white guilt?
Well, first of all,
or is that even a bad thing? I guess another way of looking at it.
Okay. There's several layers to that question.
Now it made you uncomfortable. Okay.
So critical race theory, first of all, is not being taught in school. It's not a thing in general.
As the spouse of a teacher, I can verify that.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, though, she's getting asked about it by her students all the time now.
Oh God.
Because that's all they hear about.
Yeah.
And this is stuff that they've never been taught, but all these adults are saying they shouldn't learn it. So of course,
yeah,
they want to know.
I guarantee you every teacher is still towing the line and still teaching the Pilgrims came and slavery ended at the Civil War and all that. They're teaching standard stuff.
Yeah, biting their tongue. And my wife is like, they keep asking me, and I'm like, I cannot talk about this.
Yeah.
Can we move on to Jane Eyre? Because I'm a literature teacher, for crying out loud.
Yeah. So first of all, like if you don't know anything about CRT, Carlos Maza has a video out about critical race theory. It's the best deconstruction of it I've ever seen. It's so good. And it does touch on some of the things we've been talking about. Critical race theory is a way to look at the law as no longer neutral, because it was written by people from the 1860s who probably had 1860s thoughts in their heads. And that's probably reflected in the law. So it's a way to look at the law critically through the lens of race, which I am completely fine with, but it's something that's taught in law school, not K-12 education. So, So that aside, I think the guilt that I feel comes mostly from being taught the false story at first and believing it. I don't feel guilty about the way I live my life currently. Or, I mean, of course I say stuff on occasion where I'm like, that's stupid and I feel bad about it, but I don't feel like a racial guilt, I guess, over the things I do now. I think I only really feel it when I'm like, I used to not have a problem with there being a football team named the Redskins, and thinking about that now, I'm like, it's the same as having a football team named the N-word. It's bad. So it's just guilt about stuff like that and not stuff I've done personally, right? Like I feel like if we were honest from the beginning, you would kind of not have that guilt or that awakening anyway, because you would have that would have been the story from the beginning, and it wouldn't be this realization later on in life. So the other part of your question was,
I know I threw a lot at you there.
Yeah, like how to get started in thinking about this, or without just being overcome with guilt or feeling like you're a racist and having to stop what you're doing or change your life or anything like that. I don't, what I would suggest is just pick a topic that you're personally interested in and look into the history of that and legitimately ask yourself, am I wrong about this? Could I be misunderstanding this? And I have to say, YouTube has been a huge help for me in that regard. It oddly enough, it started with Sean. He's a lefty YouTuber, but I started watching him because he kind of bashed CinemaSins, the film review channel, about their lazy film criticisms. And those were the first videos I watched. And then I started watching his political videos with the open mind. Like I clicked on the Native American genocide video and I was like, I bet I'm not going to like this video, but what if I'm wrong? I want to know what, maybe I'm wrong. And I'm alone. I'm watching a YouTube video. No one can see me. So if I am like, oh, I'm wrong, nobody's gonna know that I was wrong. Like I'm doing this in my living room, really. So I just kind of got started there, and I watched Sean, and then I moved on to H Bomber Guy, and ContraPoints kind of takes a little. ContraPoints is an acquired taste a little bit. Like I've tried to show her content to people, and it's very difficult because she dresses really weird. She talks weird. Like it's so it took a little while to get into ContraPoints, but I did, of course. And
I don't remember what the first video I saw of hers was, but I was probably kind of making this face a little bit at first, but then after about 10 minutes, I was just like sucked in, and she was like saying such brilliant things. I was like, okay, I'm watching everything, even though they're 50 hours long. I'm going to watch each one of the videos.
Yeah. But it's really hard to get like I couldn't send that to my dad. There's no way my dad is going to watch a video like that.
Which is a shame, because she makes really great points, really salient, well articulated points.
Yeah, but
and it's kind of like, how can I make this in a so she's sitting in a bathtub filled with trash. I don't know.
Dressed as a fairy with
with cat eyes.
Of course it's great to watch now that I'm a fan, but I can see why it's tough for a new person to get kind of involved. So I kind of see myself as a bridge in a way. I've kind of made my videos targeted at people like me, white male, millennial libertarians, it's people who think they're centrists, those types, because that's what I was. And because they're not going to listen to ContraPoints just because the way she looks, the way she presents. Again, not a knock. It's just, it's bizarre. Yeah. So I see myself as the entry point in a way. Like if you can stand my content, you can build your way up. So my advice would just be, pick a topic that you're in, like scroll through H Bomber Guy's catalog and find a topic you're interested in, and just give it a watch with the understanding that you may be wrong. You may be wrong about vaccines and autism. You may be wrong about race and IQ, that kind of stuff. You just go into it with an open mind, and you'll find yourself wanting to know more, I think. You said it too, like you're drawn in. You're like, what? This is how it, like, that's where that comes from. And it's just interesting to find out like the rules of society that aren't written down, I guess. It's really interesting to learn that stuff. And YouTube has been great for me in that respect. And then your other question, what's it like to do politics? It is tough because the responses are often personal. It's not just very you're wrong about this.
I imagine.
Yeah, it's not you're wrong about this fact. It's you're an idiot. Your channel should be deleted and you should be put in prison for treason or whatever.
And you're like, well, yeah.
A lot of it's very easy to kind of just dismiss, especially the more I'm sure you get this with your comments, but like the more swear words there are, the more capital, all caps, and honestly, the longer it is, the easier it is to just ignore. Like I see this wall of text and I'm just like, nope.
Moving on.
The ones that get me though are kind of the ones that have some truth to it. So when people are like, this is just you trying to apologize for your service, or this is just you trying to make up for being a racist in the past or whatever, and those are the ones that kind of get in, because while I didn't put it in the video, I was writing the script thinking that, at least, right? Like I'm sure you've experienced this, where people will say, you left this part out because you don't want to talk about blah blah blah.
Well, they
I
assign
see that.
some motive
Well,
to it.
well,
Yeah.
and sometimes they get it right though, and I'll see that comment. I'm like, they were right. I didn't want to talk about that because it would be a whole thing, and it's
Yeah.
just so. I guess the ones that bother me are kind of the ones that, well, okay, aside from like the personal attacks, it's the ones where people are like, nope, the original story I know is true, and you're not gonna convince me with your Marxist propaganda or whatever. Where I'm just like, uh, so I'm never gonna get through to this person. Like they've just decided that this is not the truth, and they're done with it. And then of course I guess the ones that really annoy me the most are where the only possible response is watch the video again. Like you missed something.
Yeah.
Like that is not what I said. Like when people put words in my mouth, like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, since we've been talking about the racism thing, when I say stuff like voter ID laws are racist, not because requiring an ID is racist, it's which ones are acceptable. Like driver's licenses are okay, but student IDs are not. Gun licenses are okay. Like why do they pick these ones and not other ones? And it's because Black people are less likely to have a driver's license. And of course, white people don't understand that because we all live in the suburbs and we all have a driver's license. But if you live in a city, it's very easy to not have one of those. But my saying voter ID laws are racist because Black people are less likely to have a driver's license, the response is, oh, so you think Black people are too stupid to get driver's license? It kind of sounds like you're the racist.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not what I said. Like, that's not even close. But they've walked away from the computer forever thinking, aha, I called him out for being a racist and I don't have to listen to him now. And those are tough because not only are they ignoring me, but they've walked away with the complete wrong message, almost worse than if they had not seen the video at all. So
so then you feel this like, oh my God, I just made it worse or something.
For
that one person anyway.
Yeah.
So where you come at it, and maybe there's a little bit of parallel here. You were kind of talking about wanting to sort of plant a seed for people to sort of like see society a little bit differently. I'm always saying that my videos are not the entree, they're the appetizer. I don't need the compendium of all known information on this topic. I just need to make it interesting and entertaining and get people to be like, wow, I want to know more about that, and go look up more themselves. And if I were to, I guess my motivation would be more like on the science hesitancy or science skepticism, conspiracy theory type stuff, like I want to plant enough seeds to get people to sort of like move away from that kind of thinking, like, I guess that's what I'm trying to combat more than on a, like a social thing. But something that happened to me recently, talking about people just assuming and applying motivation to things. I did a video it was on moon mining, but part of it, we talked a little bit about like space treaties. And I guess it was the Artemis Accords is what I was talking about specifically, but it doesn't matter. My editor put up a map of all the countries that have signed on to this treaty, pulled from Wikipedia. And cool, looks good, put it up. And then I was like out of town when that video came up. Well, one of the countries that was on there was Ukraine. And this particular map from Wikipedia did not include Crimea.
Yeah.
As part of Ukraine. So I got accused of being a Russian agent and working for Putin and all this stuff. And it was like, I remember there was one specific one that just stands out that it was like, there is no possible way this was a mistake.
Oh, I hate when people do that. Yeah.
And I'm just like, here's a possible way. I pulled it from Wikipedia. And I wasn't looking for all the potential world conflicts that weren't represented correctly on there,
Yeah. When people say that all the time, like, why did you lie about this? I'm like, I didn't lie. I just got it wrong.
Did you ever think I might just be stupid?
Like, I just said the wrong date. I don't know what to tell you. It wasn't like I sat there like, I'm gonna mess up the entire timeline of history by saying the wrong date.
We're talking about like how long you been doing YouTube?
I started the channel 4.5 years ago, almost 5. But full time 3 years, I would say.
I think there's something about that constant researching of different topics and the interconnection of the different things that you talk about, and just there's something about that does, I think, change you.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm sure your videos and your perspective have changed quite a bit over the years. I know mine have, and there's definitely some stuff early on that I just,
oh yeah,
can't believe I said that.
Yeah.
Actually, here's, I don't know the answer. I like asking people this question. How far back do you need to go in your social media, whichever one you want to pick? How far back do you need to go before you start cringing at everything that you say?
Yeah. I've thought about this a lot, because it moves.
Yeah.
It sort of trails behind me by like 2 years, I think.
It's not that far, is it?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Once I look like 2 years back, I'm like, oh my God, these videos are so amateur. Like, I'm not framed correctly. The sound is terrible. All the stuff that I've learned that I guess I don't even think about. But definitely some of my political opinions from early on, I'm just like, yeah, I can't believe I said that. There's a lot of stuff that I've kind of put into a separate category of, yes, it's true, but did I need to say it?
Okay.
Which, let me. So like babies, once babies are able to recognize themselves in the mirror, they will prefer to hang out with people who also look like them. So toddlers, like in like, not toddlers, but like babies still in diapers, will self-segregate themselves at daycare into friend groups of people that look like each other. Is that true? Yes, there have been all kinds of studies on this, but did I need to say it? I said it in a video once, and the takeaway from that is, I guess we're just born racist, and therefore I don't have to work on fixing it because it's just evolutionarily programmed. So I am like, it's true, but did I need to say it? Like, I think it just makes things worse. So yeah, there are lots of videos where I won't go back and look at them because I know I say stupid stuff. I'm like, oh, it's embarrassing. A lot of my psychology ones, especially, like, okay. I wouldn't. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, I said earlier that I like to try to get people out of like conspiratorial thinking and that kind of thing. Ironically, I think I used to be a lot more like that. And I was a lot more skeptical of science. I was definitely one of these people that was like, there's groupthink, there's scientific dogma that kind of can't be. And I definitely believed in the whole Einstein thing, that like one guy with a great idea can like usurp thousands of scientists around the world and stuff. I still think like paranormal stuff, like ghosts and aliens, it's fun, but I don't believe. I've gotten into so much heat for my UFO video that I did. Well, UAP they're calling it now, but back early in the year when all that the Pentagon report was coming out. I was
okay.
Yeah, I did a video on that, and it was very skeptical, and I caught a lot of heat for it. And once upon a time, I would have been one of those people giving the heat, but I've just kind of gotten out where it's like, it requires more than just a blurry blob over 5 pixels and a security camera or something. It requires more than that. So
I remember learning about that, especially with like fighter pilots. A lot of people seem to think fighter pilots are beyond reproach, and they're
I was told I was disrespecting the troops for questioning them.
Like, oh well, if a fighter pilot saw it, it must be true. And I'm like, I wasn't in a fighter pilot unit, but I've talked to enough of them to know that they're just like everybody else, and they see stuff and they believe in conspiracies. Look how many of them are getting kicked out for not getting the COVID vaccine. Like they're just like everybody else. Just like there are doctors and nurses who refuse to get the vaccine. So I don't feel like a fighter pilot saying he saw a UFO is any more credible than any other person, really. Perhaps even less so, because he's the only person who saw it out in the middle of the ocean and no one else was around. So I've always been quite skeptical of UFOs and that sort of stuff. But the recent buzz where everyone's like, no, they're real. The Pentagon has even said so. There's a difference between being real and being alien, right? Or unexplained, rather. Not real. But I almost, if that's sort of the reason your channel exists, I would say that mine is almost the opposite, in that I didn't start off skeptical. I started off as, this is just how it is. There's no agenda behind it. Like all these people are just paranoid. And then I'm looking into it. I'm like, sometimes there is actually an agenda. Like this law was passed for this reason, and there was clearly an agenda behind it. So it's interesting that our channels have similar purposes, but in science and politics rather than both science or whatever.
But I think that's a similar process, like just like I said, for me, it's just the more I researched all these little topics, the more I realized how much I didn't know going into it. And then it's like, wow, okay, there's a lot more to this than I thought,
That's every topic for me, where I pick something where I think it's going to be simple. Company towns is the obvious one, since I'm working on it right now, but even something like Ancient Aliens, where I thought it was just going to be a fun April Fool's video. Like I'm aware of the tip of the iceberg, and then once I get there, I'm like, oh my, this is enormous. Right. So then it becomes,
this is the whole thing now. God.
Becomes an exercise in, okay, well, what can I fit into a video that's still interesting and comprehensive?
I need to go back and watch that one of yours. I bring up Ancient Aliens all the time.
Ancient Aliens is interesting to me, and I will admit, when I was younger, I didn't believe it, but I followed it a lot, in the same way that some people kind of point and laugh at flat Earth. I was really into watching Ancient Aliens just because of how ridiculous it was. And I thought it was an interesting way to learn history. Like I learned about the Nazca, but only if you watch it and you're like, okay, well, how did they really do that? And you look up, like, how did they actually move these blocks? And you learned how they did it rather than aliens. So I enjoyed it. Those
were not European people. It must have been aliens that did
it. Why do they have their skulls shaped like this? All that kind of stuff. Because I didn't learn that in school, but I learned it from TV and then did my own research after that. Whereas most people, I think, just absorb it from the TV and accept the conspiratorial stuff. But
right back here, I've had these since I was a kid. These Mysteries of the Unexplained books.
Okay. Wasn't that a TV show?
I don't know if it was a TV show or if they just had infomercials about it all the time.
Okay.
I definitely remember the infomercials. But I grew up just obsessed with this stuff, and I was all into.
I know a lot of your videos are kind of centered around the conspiracy stuff and the UFOs and that kind of that stuff. So I was interested to know which angle you were coming from, whether you were a somewhat believer or I guess it would be skeptic or someone trying to convince people out of that thinking, but you're clearly convincing people out, which is good.
And the funny thing is, I used to hate the skeptics all the time. It was just like everything was like, it can't be possibly that. But it's like, for something isn't as big as extraterrestrial creatures visiting Earth, the burden of proof is just so high, and they have not achieved that yet, to me anyway. But there's also some that are just so like, if you know anything about how cameras work, it's clearly a bokeh effect from a triangular aperture on a infrared camera. It's like
Captain Disillusion level deconstruction you're doing.
But I mean, I went to school for radio, TV, film, so I know a thing or two about cameras, and it's just like really simple stuff like that, or the parallax effect, because
things move at different speeds.
Yeah, I mean, the shot from that airplane of this thing floating above the water, the airplane isn't sitting still.
Yeah,
it's flying at like 500 miles an hour, and so of course you're seeing like the ground shifting underneath it. It makes it look like it's flying really fast when it's probably not moving very fast. Anyway, so let's talk about something important. We talked about all this society stuff. Tell me about your ferrets. I see them in the videos all the time. I just thought you'd give you a chance to talk about
them. Well, when I was a college student, I lived in a place that didn't allow dogs or cats, but I wanted a pet. So caged animals were okay, and ferrets are caged. So I was like, okay, I want a ferret, because I had other pets growing up, rabbits, gerbils, all that, and I wanted a pet that actually cared that you were around and interacted with you. Some pets are more decoration really than they are pets, and gerbils and such are kind of on that level, I think. So I wanted a pet that would interact with me, and so a ferret was what I got. The ferrets I have now are Atlas and Peabody, and they are my third and fourth ferrets. And they're it's the first time I've had two of them together. It's always been one previously. I started the channel. I had Wheatley, just the one. I got him after I came back from my deployment. So we had like a somewhat special bond. So they sleep like 22 hours a day. They don't make any noise aside from when they get up and move around, obviously, but they don't bark or anything. They don't meow. So they're great for someone like me who just wants like a part-time pet. They have it's kind of a dog's personality in a cat's body. So they want to wrestle around and catch the ball and all that kind of stuff.
I've heard foxes described that way, that they're cat software and dog hardware.
Maybe I don't know enough about foxes. I've heard that before. But these are perfect for me. And having two of them has definitely been an experience, because one of them is the dominant one, and that's just kind of how it naturally is. So for like the first year or so, I was really trying to stop that. Like one of them is beating up on the other. Like you're supposed to, but that's like just how they naturally, hierarchy themselves, and because they're social animals. They live in groups, and so it took me a while to kind of understand that this is how the hierarchy works. There's me, there's Peabody, and then there's Atlas, and then that's just how it is, because I can't get in between the two of them. It's not like brutal or anything. It's just one of them is clearly stronger than the other and wins all the fights. So
as long as they're not hurting each other, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the playful kind. But it's definitely been an experience to have two and see them interact with each other. So I put them in at the end of all of my videos. When I'm streaming on Twitch, I have a ferret camera, so you can see them sleeping if you need more ferrets in your life. But I think they're a great pet. They came neutered and descented. They're in the same family as skunks and weasels. So they have a very strong smell if they're not descented. So I grew up hearing that ferrets stink and they're aggressive and all that. And that may have been true in the 80s and the 90s, but now that like they pretty standard, they come descented. And people who come over to my house, like a cable guy or whatever, they're when they see that I have a ferret, they're always like, "Oh wow, I couldn't smell anything." I'm like, "Yeah, they don't smell." And they're not like dogs or cats where they walk around peeing on everything to mark their territory, or anything. So you don't get that either. They're litter box trained, so
cool.
I just have to clean that every week, and that's.
Once upon a time, I really wanted a ferret. Probably back in college, actually. Come to think of it, it's funny. I kind of graduated through. I don't want to say there's like a hierarchy of pets or anything, but from weird pets to, I guess, normal pets.
Yes,
quote unquote normal.
I've definitely gotten more normal as I've gotten older.
Yeah, I was really into reptiles for a while. I had an iguana. I made the ridiculously stupid mistake of getting a Nile monitor lizard one time.
Jeez.
Which are basically crocodiles, but
yeah, don't they get really big? Like,
yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know what I was saying. I was at like a reptile show or a herpetological exposition or whatever, if you want to use more syllables. But it was a beautiful lizard. It was black and had little yellow spots all over it. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. And so I got it, and it was just the meanest son of a bitch. Like I couldn't pick it up. I couldn't do anything with it. I was scared of it, and it just kept getting bigger. And then when I realized they are literally get to the size of like crocodiles. I was like, what the hell was I thinking? Like, anyway, I finally found somebody who would take it, thankfully. But no, I had lizards for a while. I actually had a pair of rats in my 20s.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't know why I was so single, but the rats were great, actually. It's funny because I would tell people I had a couple of rats, and they were there was a white one and a black one, so I named them Crockett and Tubbs. And but they were playful, and you could pick them up, and they would actually like fetch and stuff, and they were cute. Like people would always be like, "Oh my God, you have rats," and then they come over and just be like, "Oh," they just go over to the cage and everything. But anyway, yeah, it wound up getting married, and we had cats, and then we wound up getting dogs, and now we just have dogs. So
I'm much more of a dog person if it came down to just those two choices.
I was always a cat person.
Really?
Yeah, but oh my God, they just shredded everything in our house, and was just constantly having to keep every inch of the furniture covered, and then they would pee on everything and couldn't get the smell out. And
yeah, no thanks. I can always tell when I walk into a cat owner's house. It's instant.
yeah. And I loved our cats, and one of them I had for like 13 years, 14 years. I actually lost him like just before the pandemic hit. Like I had to put him down, and then like the next week we're all in quarantine. So I was like, that's great.
Geez. Yeah, that's rough.
Well, we've been talking forever, and this was cool though. I'm glad we did this. I mean, we only chatted that one time years ago, and I always wanted to catch back up with you because I love what you do. And you used the word bread tube earlier. What exactly? Yeah. I'm not familiar with that. Old man Joe for a second here.
Bread tube is it's just the left.
Okay.
It's a socialist sort of leaning subsection. It's on Reddit.
Okay.
I'm trying to think if there's.
Why I don't know what it means.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's a right-wing equivalent, and I guess it'd be. It'd be similar to the skeptic community on the right, but I'm talking politically skeptic community.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, or the intellectual dark web, perhaps, if you're familiar with that.
There's not really anything like that on the science side that I'm aware of, anyway. I've never been a part of any group anyway, so yeah.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of teams on science, I guess, where, well, we believe that water boils at this temperature. No, you pretty much all accept the objective reality.
There are more like debunking channels that are always like shooting down some new technology or something. I'm not really one of those. That's not my thing. Because I don't have the expertise for it. Again, I had an RTVF background, so I don't claim to be a scientist. I just kind of talk about science stuff. Like, so, okay, just real quick. For example, there's a thing that's sort of like an offshoot of the double slit experiment called the delayed choice quantum eraser. It gets really complicated, but there's a creator and astrophysicist named Sabine Hassenfelder, who is a legit astrophysicist. And she did a video not too long ago that kind of was debunking other people's takes on the delayed choice quantum eraser. And I was one of them.
Ooh.
And so, but like all these people, on Twitter and stuff like, "Oh, Sabine called you out." And I'm like, then listen to her. What do you think? I'm getting defensive about that? No, she's right. I probably got something wrong. I don't have an ego about that, because I know that's mostly over my head. Like I said, I'm the appetizer. I just get people interested in it, and then they can go to Sabine and get, find out what I said wrong. I try to be as accurate as possible.
Yeah. No one puts out videos. Well, I shouldn't say no one. No one I know puts out videos that are knowingly wrong because they just want to make money or whatever.
Yeah. I'm sure somebody's doing it.
But yeah, that's why I said I had to clarify.
Well, cool. Well, I'll let you go. Since I've kept you this whole afternoon, but I appreciate this, man.
No, it was fun. I appreciate the opportunity to come on.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have talked this long if it wasn't engaging and fun to do. So,
well, maybe we'll get to do it in person sometime. maybe we can go to VidCon and not go to VidCon.
Oh yeah, we can just hang out at some house.
Yeah. That's my goal for life, is just to go places but not go to places. Just
go to Disneyland
but
but like hang out outside.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, I appreciate it, man.
All right, thank you.
Big thanks to KB for sharing his time with me. I really enjoyed the chat, and as he says at the end of all his videos, now I know better. If you haven't caught his channel before, do go check it out. Just search Knowing Better on YouTube. He's kind of like my channel, but with social commentary, and he does it with a lot of humor, so give him a look and give him a follow if you like what you see. Today's intro music was provided by Christopher McDonald. If you'd like to submit an original piece of music to include in the show, just hit me up at any of my places online at Answers with Joe, and it could wind up in the podcast. This podcast was produced by Kimmy Britt, edited by Bray Brown, listened to by you. We'll be back in a couple of weeks or so with another episode. We've got some great guests lined up, so if you're not subscribed to this podcast, please do add it to your podcast feed and whatever your preferred podcast platform might be. And please spread the word. It really helps grow the channel. As always, I'm Joe Scott. You can find me at Answers with Joe on YouTube and elsewhere around the interwebs. Thanks for listening. Now go out there and start some conversations of your own. See you next time.